Welcome back to 101 East. The logging industry in the Solomon Islands has had an impact not only on the environment here, but also on the communities, in particular on the young women. Foreign workers will often tend to take a local partner, but when their work here is done, they will leave that partner, often pregnant or with children.
Yes, I'm married to a Malaysian man. We got married in March this year. I'm 16 years old. I never intended to be with this man, but when I returned from Onyara, I found that my parents had already arranged that I would be married off to him. I'm not sure why, but I think they wanted money. I don't know how long we'll be together, because I know that sometimes when these people go and leave, they never come back. When I eventually found myself in the camp, that's when I found it hard. This man is pretty useless. He gets angry even when I visit my own relatives. He slaps me. When he treats me this way, I'm very angry with my parents. I think that money was the reason why I was married off to this man. I don't see anything in it except we are staying together for the sake of it. But I do know that one day he will leave me. Yes, I'll be very sorry if he leaves. I wouldn't have cared before, but now I am pregnant.
Dorothy, the story is a common one. There seem to be many women who are left behind in the Solomons by expatriate loggers who come and go. How big a problem is that, and how much has the logging industry disrupted the society here because of the influx of foreigners?
It has. It's broken down the influence of parents over young girls, especially in communities where families are struggling, and also the economics of having a logging camp in a certain area does have its effects, because when the logging camp moves on, then the whole local cash economy totally collapses in the area.
Let's talk about the cash economy, because it's going to collapse in a much bigger sense according to some of the worst predictions. Morgan, the way this has been handled at government level has been characterized, according to most reports, by an extreme degree of corruption and an extreme degree of giving in to pressure from foreign logging companies.
Yeah, I mean, that statement is true in the sense that we have no control over the number of logging companies operating in the country. We have license been issued to a very number of people applying for licenses, and that in itself is putting a lot of pressure on our hardwood forests.
Minister, in your mind, what is your role in this, and what is the role of the government in its dealings with foreign business?
It is the responsibility of the government to ensure that the procedures laid under law must be complied with by all other interested parties who have interest in investment in the country.
But does it cause you concern that in asking for that foreign investment, it does appear that the government in a lot of ways is being held to ransom by business interests who have no concern about the situation of the Solomon Islands?
Well, it is the responsibility of the government to ensure that they must comply with the requirements of the law, and that is the responsibility of the government.
And do they comply?
We must ensure that they must comply with those requirements.
Do they comply?
Well, we believe that any genuine investors that come into the country must comply with those requirements.
Do they comply?
I don't think so in a lot of cases. I think the problem we have here too is that maybe if the government limited the number of logging companies to large ones, the big ones that come in with money, instead of the small operators that cut corners and try and undercut the bigger ones that are run properly, we have that case.
How much influence do the foreigners have?
Well, a lot in terms of the pressure that they exert on the local people. Let me just cite one good example. Right now, as we talk now, there is illegal logging going on at Pipisu in West Area. I just came back from that site last week. And they are operating in an area that is not under the concession. Although the Ministry of Forest has written to them on 2 occasions, they have not taken note of those advice from the Ministry of Forest.
How can this happen?
Well, this is the enforcement process that I was referring to, that we need to rev up, to ensure that the kind of demand and concern that the people have must be attended to, effectively. We know that, there is a lot of illegal operation that is going on in the country. We also know that, there is a need for us to ensure that resources are available in order to enforce the requirements of the law.
But clearly the fact that this is going on points to a degree of complicity at some levels of government with some of the businesses. And the way this is regulated appears to be extremely broad and extremely fractured. So just from a philosophical perspective, tell me what is the proper relationship that a government minister should have? Because I understand that you personally have interest in logging as well. So where does the line between conflict of interest and proper government draw?
Well, the Leadership Code Act provides for a process of disclosure of financial interest. And all leaders must disclose their financial interests. That's what the law says in this country, and that is the law.
But don't you think that the fact that you have a financial interest in logging will compromise your decisions on granting of licenses, on policing of the situation?
But you have an independent process of ensuring that all this monitoring of these operations are done. For instance, in the case of the environment, you have the Environment Advisory Council that has that independent role to advise on actions that are required to ensure that environmental concerns that are raised by the people, other stakeholders.
Are those independent processes effective?
Not in the past years. It's just only now beginning to take effect. But as I've mentioned earlier, it's coming in a bit late in terms of the logging industry, because we are losing most of that, and it will be gone in 3 to 5 years' time.
This is the irony of it. I find it funny and also weird that Gordon, who has interest in logging, is the only environment minister that has actually taken office and has actually strengthened the monitoring of logging and all these other issues. I mean, Morgan, I know, will admit to that too. I mean, it's ironic. How can that be? I mean, like you said, conflict of interest, where are the lines drawn? And so how can you explain that somebody like Gordon, who has logging interests, is doing a better job than a minister who was in office, didn't have logging interests, and didn't do the job?
Minister, so the future right now is looking particularly bleak. 70% of export revenue comes from these forests, and that will be all but gone within the next 5 years. How do you plan to deal with that?
We are fully aware of that, and that's why, under the medium-term development strategy, you will see that, we are focusing on various sectors, as alternative sectors to the logging. In the areas of agriculture, fisheries, tourism, we need to build more, put more resources into building up our infrastructure. We need to establish a good arrangement for our rural people to have access to financing, all of that. And I suggest that, we look into the details of those arrangements, because these are the kind of arrangements that should have been done in the past.
Okay. Well, unfortunately, we don't have time to look into.
Now that we are doing it,
we don't have time to look into the detail. But just a final word from both of you on how optimistic you feel. Obviously, you have to live here and you have to make the best of what's going on. But do you put much faith in the fact that you can replace the income? And obviously, you can't replace the forests. But how optimistic are you about the future?
Well, everything depends on our political stability now, and this is has been the country's greatest downfall. We've had very fast turnover of governments, which meant policies put in place were just beginning to be implemented, and then there's a change of government. Like Gordon says, it's late, but then now what we've got to do is not talk about the fact that it's late. Now what we're going to do now is ensure that government looks at another alternative, and I think tourism and tuna is the best way to go for
Morgan,
this country.
final word from you, please.
I share the same argument as Dorothy, that we really need some political stability so that we can embark on some actions to look at alternatives that will help support the economy when our hardwood forest runs out.
All right. Challenges ahead. Thank you very much to all of you, and good luck. And that's all from this edition of 101 East. Thanks for joining us. See you again next time.